Welcome to Play Therapy Community Podcast, providing connection, information, and inspiration to child therapists all around the world. Here's your host, a licensed psychotherapist, a registered play therapist, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. I am super excited to share with you today's guest, Paris Goodyear-Brown. I first heard about Paris. Well, first of all, everybody knows about Paris, but I first met Paris through Dora Henderson, one of my very best friends in the world. She couldn't stop just going on and on about how incredible the trauma play therapy training is. And we invited her to be a speaker at the Neuroscience of Play Therapy Summit at the beach recently in 2022, and it was beyond incredible. Paris is an expert in our field. She is passionate, and she's very, very kind. I remember she was also on my symposium, and after we recorded, every year I lose one or two. Sadly, I lose one or two recordings, and I lost her recording. That was the only one, and she was ironically the only one that I wore lipstick for when we recorded, and it was gone. And I couldn't even sleep the night before, so I messaged her, and I was definitely in a state of dysregulation. I was out of my best self. And when we got on the recording, she sang to me, and I felt her kindness and I felt her love even before we started recording. So I'm excited to share this interview with everybody today on her book. At the time of this recording, it's recently came out, Parents as Partners in Child Therapy, and she also has another book coming out. Just fascinating stuff, beyond wonderful. I think it should be like essential reading at some point for people that are going into child therapy, because it's so important that not only we know to include the parents, but how to do it, and how to do it in a way that doesn't feel and make them feel worse, and make it harder to support their kid in a way that helps.
Yeah.
Okay, so Paris, I'm talking about you like you're not here. So before we get started, let me have you introduce yourself. Tell people who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm Paris Goodyear-Brown. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor and an approved consultant in EMDR, and the executive director of the Trauma Play Institute, the creator of the Trauma Play model, and also the clinical director of Nurture House, which is our sweet child and family treatment center in Franklin, Tennessee, where we do we try it all out. It's our real world laboratory for everything we then write and train about in trauma play.
I know I got to see some pictures of it. It's just my dream to go there in person.
I'd love to have you.
Oh, I would love to come. I bring my camera though.
That's okay.
I like to take pictures. What really stood out when I seen the pictures to me was how it's very intentionally designed. Everything seemed to have a purpose, from the sensory motor aspect of it, the just everything. It just seemed like to just really have a felt sense of safety and connection all around.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's really fun to have a place where, and this is true for, I think, all of our play therapy spaces. It's really sweet to have a place where kids can come in and they feel the neuroception of safety, not knowing why, but if we were to break it down, the interoception, the exteroception, all of the science behind that neuroception for them is also just playful and fun. And it's neat to get to be the offerer of that kind of experience for families.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. You talk about like playful and fun. That's where we can go into states of growth and healing that otherwise are inaccessible. Okay, so I recently read your Parents, and I have the Zoom background on, so it might not show. This book is so good. Oh my gosh, I love the polyvagal zoo, the pictures of you and your kids, the handouts. Oh my goodness, the handouts and the activities, it's invaluable. And I know at the time of this recording, you have another book coming out now. So I want to kind of just I want to be mindful of time and make sure we hit what we want to hit, because I could ramble all day long about how much I love you and your work. Okay, so let's talk about your new book, Big Behaviors in Small Containers,
Mhm.
131 trauma-informed play therapy interventions for treating disorders of dysregulation.
Yeah, that's kind of a big title, I think, like a lot of words in that title. But it's really this idea that what we tend to see as clinicians is the big behavior, right? And what either shouting or aggression and self-injurious behavior, all those externalizing behaviors, or big behaviors that are internalized, like suicidal ideation and shutdown and withdrawal. But that each of those are really just begging the question from the co-regulating caregiver, what is the underlying need that's not being met here yet? And so I'll show you. Your copy is on the way to you, Jackie, I promise. But this is the new book, and it came in to my hot little hands last week, like hot off the press. May 10th will be the actual release date. But it's Big Behaviors in Small Containers, and the cover art is just so powerful to me because it really is what I'm hoping we will be able to help caregivers shift their paradigms around. This idea that when we, and not just parents, but teachers, daycare workers, bus drivers, karate, senseis, whoever is in time and space with kids on a regular basis, these big behaviors is what we see. But really, what's under there is this, river of anxiety or sadness and some needs that just aren't being met yet. There's also, I don't know if you can see, but in the shadow is the diagnoses we give, ADHD, ODD, trauma, OCD, anger, anxiety. And this may make me unpopular, I don't know, but the whole
Bring it on, girl.
diagnostic categories that we have don't really do justice to the way our brains and bodies work and the normal reactions of normal people that for them are unusual or abnormal. So trauma can engender all sorts of things that look like pathology that are really our brains and bodies trying to work out what we need to heal. And if we can get under the big behaviors and really see what is going on in our autonomic nervous systems and our stress response system, I think that's the ball game. We can really change the world one traumatized child and family system at a time, right? That's the hope anyway.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. And I think about, like, I can almost hear underneath your words because you've sat with these kids, you've played with them, you've been with their parents, and it's a world of pain. And to think of what was at the source of it, trauma, a lot of times that ends up in a label. It doesn't really kind of speak to the humanity of it all, nor does it help us, provide the treatment that they necessarily need. I think about Dr. Siegel in one of his books. I'm not sure which one it was. He talks about the rigidity chaos continuum and about how he opened up the diagnostic manual and really realized that the diagnosis kind of leaned one way or the other, where the very middle is where, that's where our optimal existence
Right.
kind of is.
That's which is some of what, in the new book, there's several playful ways of, like, I just think for us to shift the paradigms for co-regulating caregivers, we need them to really understand what's happening in the stress response system, and kids themselves to be able to go, oh, wait, I'm just moving into the sloth response, as opposed to expecting parents and kids to understand all the neuroscience language that can be a little overwhelming and scary. So there's things in the book like Amy G. Dalla is our almond-shaped female with like big eyelashes who, Amy G. Dalla talks to us, the amygdala. Yeah.
Girl.
There's that playful metaphor in Big Behaviors in Small Containers. There's several in both books, parents as partners, and then put a different way in this for clinicians, the window of tolerance work and really helping parents and teachers and the kiddos and teens themselves look at, how do I know when I'm in hyperarousal? How do I know when I'm in hypo? And how do I know when I'm in, my kids call it Oz, the optimal arousal zone was a little much to say. Yeah. So a lot of our kids call it being in Oz when, what is it to be in that just right place, which for me, I think about, I don't know what that looks like for you, but and we all know the window of tolerance and the wonderful work that Dan Siegel has done to kind of promote this idea that there are arousal zones and a way for us to know more about what's going on internally for us. And when I think about that optimal arousal zone, I think about, like, I was at this picnic once with a mom who had this 5-month-old baby strapped on her body, but facing out. And the baby was like this.
Just embracing the world.
Exactly. The baby had clearly been fed. The baby had just had a nap, and the baby was completely grounded and open, connected, able to give and receive, neurocepting safety on every level, ready to connect. That's the way I think of that optimal arousal zone for us. So there's exercises on that idea as well in the book, but making the stress response states playful and able to be explored in different ways, I think is helpful. It decreases the shame, right?
Absolutely. Gosh, it reminds me, Paris, of something that Dr. Janet Courtney,
Yes.
both love her. You danced with her. She's
Yes,
beautiful.
I do love her.
She talked about how, she really teaches us how to work with infants and toddlers, really young children. But she talks about asking permission about how little babies, there I go, disappearing with the background. How the little baby, you can kind of request permission through your body language, and think even your intonation of voice. I just heard it when you said what that's like for you. I'm thinking just hearing you speak is like my window of tolerance, because I can hear your safety in your voice. But she talks about the little baby will reach and be like, "Oh, yeah," and when or if they pull back, then you know that that's not what they want. So think about even at a young age that applies.
Yeah. Well, and part of, especially when there's been attachment trauma at, very early in life, there wasn't a story keeper who was keeping that story for that little one. So when the little one, moves away, we say probably 100 times a day at Nurture House, your body is letting me know that, or what's your body letting you know? And that's because they may not have had someone who was, when they would startle awake because they heard the trash guy on the street, bang the can around, there was no caregiver saying, "Oh, sweetheart, that was, you were sleeping so deeply, and then this scared you and you woke up." And there's no one responding in an attuned way to those states. So the nuance of what we're saying without our words is really the beginning of trusting that someone else is going to keep our story for us, meet our needs, that the world's a safe place to be in. And when they don't have that, we have to recapitulate it in different ways.
Oh, that's so good. And I love that word, recapitulate. I've never actually heard it. That's so good. I'm going to Google it after this. But that thought of they didn't get what they need, I think a lot of times as therapists, we focus on what happened to you. But it's really important to think about what didn't happen that needed to happen. And just your words, that's a pretty profound statement. Like your body is, that's like, I am with you. I'm here with you. We're together. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in the trauma play model, we talk about these 3 roles, the safe boss, the nurturer, and the story keeper. And we, the new book particularly is framed around that idea that we are moving into setting boundaries as kids are little, and how do we help parents to do that better as well? How do we nurture? There's a whole section on attachment enhancement games. I feel it's always a tricky balance as a writer to toggle back and forth in different works between theoretical underpinnings, the most recent literature, case examples, and then what do I practically do when I'm sitting in the room with a kid and a parent and something hard is coming up? How do we help them to delight in each other differently in the current moment? How do we take what, has been maybe a vacuum of silence between a child and a parent? Sorry, I meant for this to be quieted before we get on, but I did not do that. So
it's almost like a metaphor of how things just show up when you
things just pop up right in the room when we're together. But that idea of helping them, how do we build coherent narrative in this moment right here in the session? So whereas parents as partners has some of the theoretical and some of the practical. Big Behaviors in Small Containers is really a very, very practical book,
Okay.
meant
Like
to give lots of interventions that can be scaffolded on those core components of the trauma play model.
Okay, okay. Now I noticed in the parents as partners, there's a couple of similarities. Like I love the polyvagal zoo. It's like so
Yeah,
beautiful. There's a mobilization and immobilization, and I mean, and you have animals in there. I love
yeah,
pictures jumping around, but I loved it. It almost feels like look at this, look at that. A kid in a candy store. The pictures of like you holding your baby and
yes.
this regulation, co-regulation, and then there's this soothing image. So we got to see like a real life version of what it looks like with the body language. So good.
Yeah, well, that particular set of images, Madison was Madison, who's 17 now. She just turned 17 like a month ago when I was out in Seattle teaching, and she came with me, and we went we went to a Korean spa, which I'd never been to one before, and it was just amazing. We had a wonderful time. But she's 17 now, and that was when she was maybe 1.5. Those pictures were taken, and we had just pulled up at Mammoth Caves in Kentucky, and she bonked her mouth with a sippy cup, and of course got very upset. So I picked her up and put her on my hip, and she put her hand on my clavicle, on my collarbone, and what was soothing herself that way. And really, it circles back to what we were talking about before, when the little one hasn't had the thousands and thousands of repetitions of need, meeting, and soothing.
Mhm.
Their brains literally don't have the infrastructure neurobiologically to do the self-soothing work. So when Maddie was really, really little, if she was upset or hungry, I would nurse her, and she would, and I'll actually start over here and then kind of make my way across the screen to show what I'm talking about. I would nurse her, and she would soothe. And then about 6 months after that, she found my collarbone. And if she was upset and I was nursing, she would nurse and she would touch my collarbone. 6 months after that, I weaned her. She no longer needed to nurse. But if she was upset, I would hold her. She'd touch her collarbone and found her thumb.
Oh,
6 months after that, she no longer needed to touch my collarbone. She just sucked her thumb when she was upset. And then 6 months after that, she no longer needed to suck her thumb. But you see how that goes from being like completely soothed by the other to learning how to self-soothe over thousands and thousands of repetitions. So for our little ones who didn't get that, that's the place we have to start in therapy, right? Is just in that serve and return communication, opening and closing circles.
that's so
And
good.
lots
Is that
of
what kind of like heard Lisa Dion say term it, and I think Alan Shore as well, the external regulator. So in the very beginning, when you were on
yeah.
the side of the screen, it was like the
Mhm.
external regulator, and then through thousands and thousands of experiences, it went co-regulation all the way to then she could self-regulate.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Being wholly soothed by the other first is necessary in order to become a fully autonomous individual who can soothe the self.
Ooh.
It's really it's a
But without
fascinating set of
that, there's like
things.
not even that interest infrastructure like that. The brain is developed in a different way if you don't get those very beginnings of kind of like that external or what you're describing as I was 100% there. And over all these thousands of interactions, she was able to do it on her
Yeah.
own. And there was really some stuff happening in the brain. It wasn't just a learned behavior, the infrastructure of the brain
Right.
changed.
Yeah.
I
Well,
like
and you say it's interesting. You say 100% there. I immediately think, we're only really attuned to our little ones maybe about 20% of the time, which is such good news for us as parents, and for us in helping shape parents who we care for in family systems where there's trauma, because they don't have to be perfect or fully available all the time.
yeah.
Just having some moments where we get it right for our kids, we interpret it accurately is enough to lay that scaffolding.
Girl, yes, and one thing we need to say, I think, is parenting can be hard. There's some challenges sometimes. It's beautiful, but there's definitely some challenges. So hats off to all the parents there. I know you're a parent, I'm a parent too. It's sometimes it's a tall order.
Yeah. Well, the idea, we talk about this in Parents as Partners in Child Therapy. The goal is really to help parents shift their paradigms and keep to kind of reopen their compassion well with the traumatized child in their care. But to do that, we have to deal with the parent's shame. And as a parent of 3, I have certainly dealt with shame around my own parenting decisions, the worst moments in myself over time. And we talk about this idea that shame gets in the way of shift for the parents and teachers that we're working with. And so anything we can do to let them off the hook, particularly giving them information about the in utero experiences that child may have had before they even got into the adoptive or foster parents' arms. Anything we can do to remove the shame for parents will help them to be able to shift faster, to reopen the compassion well for kids.
That's so beautiful. And I think about like sometimes just going back to Dr. Siegel's work a little bit, making sense of the story can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about the vacuum of silence. Tell us about that.
Well, we work with so many families who've experienced trauma at Nurture House. It's been a theme over years now. Parents will sometimes, they so don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to hurt their child more by saying the wrong thing to them about a scary thing that's happened. So they sometimes, either because they don't trust themselves or the words sound unspeakable, or because they have had trauma themselves. They may not give their child a story for the hard thing that's happened. The parent goes away to rehab or to jail, and they don't give a reason why that parent is gone. And suddenly that parent returns and there's no meaning being made, no coherent narrative of the story. But you and I know that it's in them, right? It's already in trauma play. We talk about bringing it in the room. It's already in the room. So saying, that when you heard the glass break on the walls of the kitchen, that the spaghetti Daddy did throw the spaghetti plate against the wall and it crashed. They already know, they're filling in something, right, in that vacuum of silence. So being able to say, here's what happened from this perspective, and then helping the child identify. There's a whole section of this in the Big Behaviors in Small Containers book.
Can you hold it up one more time just in case somebody's just popping up?
Yes. Big Behaviors in Small Containers. One of the, towards the end, there's the helping to create more coherent narratives for children, and things like timeline gardens and how we help kids access their sensory experiences related to the trauma. Because Dan Siegel talks about how, the left brain needs the information from the right hemisphere in order to create a coherent narrative. So we need to be able to take the story of what happened, the words and the events, but pair them with the sensory experiences, the relational ruptures and repairs that may have happened, the gestalt to the thing, right? Yeah. So the context requires, what did you smell? What did you see? What did you hear? And kids often have all that within them, but maybe not yet a safe enough place to say, we can hold this with and for you. Oh. So it's okay to talk about this here with us. We've got it with you. We can stick together. When we stick together, we can do this hard thing of holding the story. So we help parents figure out.
I just literally felt that. I'm thinking about, like, you have like the term story keepers, like at the year amazing presentation. Like those stories are hard to hold for a kid to have a space. You really just described kind of like what some of us refer to as like holding space for our clients.
Yes. Yeah. Being able to name the hard thing, bring it in the room. And the thing is, I guess I don't, I worry sometimes that if we're not able to name it, and we name it in a way that says, one of the things I know about you is, we name it and then we go right back to play. We don't talk about this today. I'm not going to ask you 100 questions, but I really don't want children to be referencing the therapist in the room for, well, do they know about the scary thing that happened? Can they hold it if they do know? How will I know when they're ready to know? So we name it first and help them structure it some if they need that.
Oh, that sounds so safe, and I think about, like, how that must feel so relieving for a child that when you say vacuum of silence, I know that's a lot of cultures and families is
Mhm.
don't talk about it, and then we won't think about it, and then it'll be like it never happened, which is
Yeah,
work like that.
yeah. That holding of the grief and the gratitude together is, I think, and this book may not sell any copies, but I want to write a book.
Yes.
And I have two or three on the agenda. But after that, I want to write a book called Truth Telling, or really, I think I want it to be called Tell the Truth to the Children.
Oh,
Just tell the truth to the children because they already know it and they're fully human people with all the thoughts, feelings, behaviors that we have. Why would we think that they can't hold it?
yeah.
You know, and we can all hold it together.
So many times over my career, I've had situations where I say many times, maybe 4 times, a parent has completed suicide, and
Mhm.
the other parent is in this painful position of do we tell the kids? Do we not tell the kids? If we tell the kids, how do we tell them without hurting them? They're already really sad that they died, and it's this huge, just painful, just confusing, just experience for everybody.
Mhm.
What kind of guidance would you give to the therapist that's working with a parent that comes to you in such
Yeah.
a scenario?
Yeah, hmm, I would first say that it's again, it's already in the room,
Yeah.
you know? And I do wonder, I think sometimes parents want to protect their children. And
Mhm.
then I think sometimes we're also protecting the self when we don't name the thing that has happened.
Yeah.
And I think if we can come up with a developmentally sensitive, appropriate narrative of what it is that's happened, it is always best to just go ahead and matter of factly share that because the words, parents sweat a lot over the right words,
Yeah.
but the words don't actually have, that's the left brain part. They're important, but they don't matter as much as the whole way of being with the child while you're telling them the story of what happened. That is
Mhm.
holding the grief and the gratitude together. You know, this happened. This is super sad. And we're gonna get through it together. But I'm big enough, strong enough, wise enough, and kind enough, this circle of security mantra, to name it and then hold your big feelings about it as they come. I think when we don't name it, it gets so much bigger and scarier for everybody. The unspeakable.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful because it's already there and you gave us the words to be able to kind of put it out there. And then you think about how healing that must be for everybody. That there's
Mhm.
this sense of expression. Now you talk about like putting the words to it, to the experience, and um, would you use the word integration? Would that apply? Like you're integrating that experience?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It is meant to create an integrated narrative that can be, we can leach the emotional toxicity out of it to some extent and be able to name it as a part of your life story, but without it being overly activating in the present moment anymore. But to do that, you might have to, I don't believe every child has to slog back through every gory detail of the trauma that's occurred for them. Some people, we don't even know exactly why, but some people heal more quickly in those ways. They either compartmentalize or they're able to metabolize the trauma differently. But the ones who have intrusive and avoidance symptoms that are creating these big behaviors usually do need more integration work around their trauma narrative. Um,
So helpful. Hey, before we finish up, there's one thing that I want to kind of make sure we cover. Something you said at the Neuroscience of Play Therapy Summit that really impacted me was we had like the speaker question thing, and you said sometimes we get dysregulated as therapists. And you have, whether it's your clinicians or you even described you doing it, go lay on the cold marble floor and just be able to regulate. What a great
mhm.
image that is. But could you speak to how that helps to bring you back online before your next session? Or just online to be human?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I think, we it's a duality. I'm always trying to help our therapists in training hold between, if are we really saying you just have to keep stretching yourself to hold all this stuff all the time? There has to be a way to discharge it, right? To kind of clear if we're being poured into all the time, we have to have a way to siphon things off. So when I see one of my clinicians carrying a lot of extra weight, metaphorically, I will say, what do you need? Do you need to go jump on the jumperoo outside? Do you need to swing on our magic carpet swing? For me, I like to lay down on the marble floor and imagine it's leaching the hard stuff out of me at the moment. And I'll have my sweet people come around. They'll pet me or touch me or ground me a little bit and sometimes I cry. I think, we have very real human reactions to some of the things that we have to hold. And if we can do that for each other and say, hey, you're looking like you're carrying a whole lot. How do we help you siphon off some of that? That's a real gift to each other in this field,
That is, and you have a jumper, you have ways that the clinicians can regulate. Just before we even hit record, I was telling you about like when I'm tired, how I cry easily.
Yeah.
I need a jumperoo. That's what I need. I've been riding my bicycle around like crazy in the neighborhood, though, trying to get up to high speeds.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, there's only so fast you can get on a bicycle, though.
Well, that probably releases your endorphins and all that, right?
Yeah, I'm the fastest person in this little neighborhood right now, I think.
Okay, now that's going to be a wonderful image for me for the rest of the day. Jackie Flynn, like riding her bike as hard as she can in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'll have to send you a picture of it. I got a little bell and a light on there. Now we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure people know where to go to learn more from you, whether it's to buy your book or take your trauma play training or whatever it is that you have to offer that people can learn more.
Yeah. So, ParisGoodyear-Brown.com, all one word, is the main site for me. And then you can click buttons to go to TraumaPlayInstitute.com, which is the training arm, or Nurture House if you want to see and understand what we do in our space there differently. I think books and so forth are going to be available, wherever books are sold. But PESI Publishing is publishing this new one, Big Behaviors in Small Containers. And then Parents as Partners in Child Therapy is through Guilford. And there's the next Trauma Play foundational training will be, I think, in September. We're going to take the summer off, but there's an advanced training coming up in May. I believe that one's got a waiting list now, but we do several, quarterly, we do a training, a foundational, and then an advanced in the larger certification process. And so those will be available on TraumaPlayInstitute.com.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll put links below this video, and you have a TED Talk out there that's just,
oh yeah,
wow. We'll put a link below there too as well. Just one thing that I'm thinking about, that cover of the book. There's a handful of books that I can bring to mind that either the cover or the title is healing in itself. And it seems like that falls in that category. Just seeing the cover is very informative. I think about like another one, like Primal Womb. You can literally just hear the title of that and it's like, ooh, I got that. Or How to Be a Good Parent When You Didn't Have One Yourself. Or by looking at that book cover and the big scary kind of overarching.
Oh, I know. I'll hold it up again to say,
this
is what our parents see, and it's what I see in our parents sometimes. Like they show up to me first like that sometimes, and I have to find their underlying need that's not met yet too.
Yeah, that's what, oh my gosh, Lisa Dion describes that as the setup. I never even realized it. And then I seen it myself once I had her training. I was like, ooh, I'm irritated with this person right now. I bet it's because they're irritated with me or something else. And it turns out it really is.
Yeah.
It's incredible how that works. Well, Paris, thank you so much for being on the Play Therapy Community Podcast. I love you. I love your work. And you're really creating a legacy in this world. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jackie. And I will see you. Hopefully we'll get to be in the same space again soon. But if not, I will be picturing you riding your bicycle all around your neighborhood.
Fast.
Yeah. Well, and I'll see you at the Play Therapy Summit in just a month or so, right?
Yeah,
Not
that
even.
and maybe Mid-Atlantic from Dr.
Yeah. Mhm.
Diana Gill, and then we have the Association for Play Therapy Conference in
Mhm.
Missouri. If those of you listening or watching haven't heard of the Association for Play Therapy yet, definitely check it out. There's some
Mhm.
amazing resources. It's really the
Mhm.
gold standard of play therapy.
Yeah, it's a fun time for sure. All
Yeah.
right, Jackie, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye, Paris.